stage. Right now, in the background already for 5 months, is we're building a data-driven solution that connects you guys with you guys in a digital way. And there's many people doing it, but they're trying to conquer the world. What we want to do is focus on you guys, keep our focus. So funding-ready founders, looking for funding between $500,000 and 10 million. So I'm really interested to hear from the investors, and Aurora already, we spoke about this yesterday. You guys are doing that as a fund, also in the background, not as a core business, but you're looking at the data-driven thing. So I'm wondering that in combination with how VC would look like with all these alternative vehicles around, how do you see venture capital ending up in this direction? Of course, taking into account what will happen to the founders. How can they get in touch with you in the future?
I'm happy to kick things off. So 3 years ago, I met the guys from Cedars, and they said, oh, we're companies raising 50K. And I thought, oh, that's quite cute, 50,000 pounds being raised on there. And then I met them a year later, and they said, oh, we've got companies raising 300,000 pounds. And I thought, oh, if you're an angel investor, you better watch out, right? Things are happening there. And I met them last year, and they said companies are raising 2 to 4 million pounds. And I thought, shit, if you're a VC, you actually got to watch out now, because things are happening. So without doubt, what we've seen over the last 5-6 years is a mass democratization in the access to capital, right? There are more and more capital sources for companies. It's never, ever, ever, in spite of Brexit, and I'm as sad as anyone else upset, it's never been a better time to be a founder. There is more money available now than there has ever been in the history of the world for early stage companies. It's cheaper to create a company, the cost of failure is lower. EIS, SEIS, TechS in Finland, Cedars, Crowdcube, micro VC funds, hedge funds, so it's all there. So from our perspective, what that means is that we have to really prove value, because the reality is you can get cheaper capital in other places than you can get from a VC fund. So I think this is the time of reckoning for the VC world, and we have to show real value over the next few years, otherwise we're going away.
Okay, I think that's probably the theme I'd take. If you've seen the movie Gattaca, you kind of know that sci-fi generally predicts the future. In that sort of world, we're completely irrelevant. Everything is automated, and there'll be capital will be allocated by a set criteria by a computer. And I suspect, kind of quite depressingly, it's pretty hard to avoid that sort of reality. But I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. I'm 37 years old, so let's have fun for the next 10 years and then see what happens, right?
The angle I have is that you see a lot of secondary funds that are extremely active, that are constantly looking for deal flow. So over time, I think our illiquid sector will become a lot more liquid. And with that, with the right tools around it, I think, starts to create a lot more transparency in the market, which I think ultimately helps everyone. Everyone gets its fair price. And in that sense, I'm not afraid at all of competitors. I see them as colleagues. We look at hundreds of companies per year and invest in 3, 4, or 5 per year. So we mostly say no to companies, and it doesn't mean that therefore they're bad companies. Most of them are great companies. So that's one. The other is, ultimately, I believe that investing is a people's business. We will not invest in whatever business model, in whatever plan you have, if we don't have the fit with the people, because you have to deal with each other for the next 3 to 5 years as a marriage. And so, it doesn't matter if the personal fit is not there. And I don't see that, and I hope that will not go away.
AI is a challenge for every knowledge-based business. The legal profession's been looking at it. Are we all going to be replaced by artificial intelligence and analysis of laws? No, we're not. There's a ghost inside the machine. We are the ghost inside the machine. We have a role to play, and the same will be true in the capital allocation as well. A lot of it can be done by algorithms and analysis and really smart products like your one. Other bits, the analysis of the intangibles, which will make the difference when not just capital is commodity, but the allocation of capital is commodity. Still, to get alpha to differentiate, you're going to need the ghost of the machine.
Especially in the early stage world, right? There's a lot of these AI funds that have been set up in the last couple of years where they go, oh, we look at app Annie download data and Alexa movements and all this kind of stuff. And so it's in the very early stage, there's a lot of noise in the signal, right? So actually pulling out real signal from noise is incredibly hard. Because frankly, if you went from 1 download a day to 10,000 downloads a day, that's big growth, but what does that actually mean about where you're going to be as a business? And in the early stage, it is actually about, it's not about that initial data, it's about how you continue to create a business out of something. And so I'm not worried about algorithmic investing in the very early stage world. Maybe it can help you identify an interesting company, but it's still about, in here, do you believe in this opportunity? Are you willing to put money behind it? And guess what? I think, was it Alex Ferguson that said, guess what, there's a lot of squeaky bum time, right? In early stage companies. You gotta sit there and you're like, holy shit, are we gonna make payroll this month? What's gonna happen? What can we do to help the business out? So,
I think it's going to be a very, very powerful tool, but it's still a tool in the toolbox of decision makers that is a very important element, but not the final element.
Okay, so in the future, how can these guys, so we get a lot of people who build a tech company and, oh damn, I have now 10 people, I have now 20 people, and I became a CEO. Now I need to go, my people say I need to go fundraise, because we need to do this. But well, they're actually rather maybe programmed, you know, and then you cannot learn the social skill all of a sudden. I mean, you can learn both sides a little bit, but you have mostly affinity to one of the both sides. So what would you recommend our audience today, how they can reach out to you in the near future? I mean, would it, so we had this guy from this dating site for married people who went belly up 2 years ago. He was my keynote.
oh yeah, my username was, no.
It's all online show, so it's freely available. But he worked together.
Madison, Ashley Madison.
Yes, thank you, yeah. I forgot his name. But it was super interesting talk because the person worked with all the universities, all this big data thing, but it's such a gray area and it means nothing, right? It's the same as we see. But he tried to crack the code about like recruitment and dating and everybody together where there's two parties needed to find each other, like these two parties. I believe it's about the individual, not brands. So individual person. So you had a certain exit at some time, bam, and then you become a VC. That's very trackable online. Also the news which flew out of that. On the startup side, it's the big bang did not happen online or offline yet, but it's about to, so that will be measured better. But wouldn't you say, to make a long story short, that you're looking in a way for a younger version of yourself and you would like to accelerate this by any means possible? And then my second question, how are we going to solve this offline thing? How much time do founders need to spend with you before you trust them, before you think in your mind, okay, click, now I'm going to invest in this guy?
So this is a problem people have been thinking about for a long time, right? Because we invest in digital businesses, but we have a very old-fashioned way of actually making the investment. The investment process is quite old-fashioned. So I had incredibly high hopes, and still do, for AngelList as a platform, right? And actually, we sourced one investment which looked great for a long time off AngelList. But I've been actually quite disappointed by it, because it tends to be, it's not alpha created, it's beta created, right? It's basically beta followed in it. It's an index platform to the early stage world. And I still don't know, I don't know if it can go offline, because in the end, or online, because in the end, it is about that personal connection in the early stage, about connecting with someone. So are there tool sets that can help reduce the friction of connecting with people and finding the right investor across the world with the right company? Absolutely. It doesn't make the investment process. It doesn't actually make the investment though.
Ultimately, I think it's a pretty Darwinistic existence, really, being a startup. And it can be, like you're saying, some of the softer skills, the marketing skills are not necessarily hardened when you're pitching as an entrepreneur. That doesn't mean that your startup's not going to be super successful. It's not. No, it's not. And there's plenty of examples of deep tech companies that all they could do is code, right? That became super successful because the market spoke and people bought their product. So, it depends as a VC. It depends how gut instinct you are versus how structured you are and how you make that decision. But in the end, the majority of the decision you're making is qualitative. You're saying those things you're talking about. Do I believe, like over a 5-minute coffee or over a 12-month period of dating, that this person is going to be able to execute on whatever the hell the business plan is?
So that's why I'm going to slightly disagree this panel. The panels are more fun when people disagree on stage as well. So, ABF, always be fundraising, right? I mean, founders always have to raise money, and we've seen good companies go under, even great tech companies go under, because the founders can't pitch what they're doing effectively. And that doesn't mean, by the way, I have to be a super smooth salesman from California. What that means is you gotta be able to speak passionately about what your technology does, what the business does, how it's differentiated, and what it's gonna be when it grows up. And I think every good founder is able to do that. You might say, oh, Mark Zuckerberg got Asperger's. But if you look at the very first time he ever was on TV in 2004 in Boston, he was able to, in a 30-second clip on TV, articulate what his business was, why it was important, and what it was going to be a year from now. And I think that's a skill set that every founder has to have. You have to raise more money for these companies, right? At least in the world that we operate.
Yeah, well, one thing which is kind of tangential, sorry to hop on my word, but which I said to Czech down there when we were watching all these pitches, is, God, I'd just love to go to a place where you could see videos of all the super successes. You could see that video of Zuckerberg back then, right when they started out. And I bet you that there'd be some monster successes out there that just had horrible first pitches, right? It'd be really, I think, really encouraging for a lot of entrepreneurs out there who this is really difficult to do. So yeah, I think maybe you can build some of that into what you're trying to build, right? Just try and tell people the journey, because people just freak out when there's this relationship which is completely imbalanced between he's got the money or she's got the money and I really need the money, and this tension comes into play. It just kind of, it screws up the whole thing. So maybe you could work on that side of it. Like that would be really helpful to entrepreneurs, I suspect.
Yeah. And so far, I think few people are focusing on the soft side. Also, speech to text or facial recognition. We're all looking at it right now to really see, with text, you can see how a person is talking in like 90 seconds. There's some Hong Kong-based
But just to count that, I mean, every time I go to one of these demo days, I'm always like so disappointed by the pitches because they all sound exactly fucking the same, right? Like it's like my name is Joe. The problem that I had 2 years ago was this, or meet my customer Bill. The problem Bill's got. I'm like, tell me why you're doing this. What are you passionate about? How are you going to change the market that you're attacking? And it's not about. So I don't know if you can. I mean, you can teach people how to communicate better, but you can't over structure what it is they're doing.
But that's the thing we're always looking for, right? That's the nugget that hits home for me, right? It's when you're just sitting there, you try to not say it, the person just is able to enunciate in that way, and it's just, for me it's about that honesty, it's about it just feels real. Because we're being sold to 1,000 times a day wherever we go, whatever walk of life we come from, whatever business we're in. And we're being sold to 100 times a month or something, and so that's the thing that sparks it for me, is when I feel this is really genuine. Rather than those demo day pitches you're talking about, Sean, where you just want to walk out after the first two.
I do think that obviously in very early phases you have to take bets. That's your business model. It's fine that half of the businesses ultimately don't make it. I think it is very important that you either have a project that has seed, venture, and growth, sort of full circle, that you can really support a company over the long term, or that there are partnerships that exist where real data is shared. Like, this was the original business plan, this is where they now stand, this is how they're tracking, so that a follow-on investor feels comfortable making those steps, not based on a pitch, but based on history. And so I think their data transparency can help as well. Finding ways how to do that in a valuation that is fair is the trick, but that's why we do spend time going across Europe, talking to VCs and getting to know them better and getting to know what their best deals are.
All right, so coming back to how would VC look like? I mean, it's over discussed, but it's an interesting time now with all this big data and lots of other ways that weren't there before, even last year. So, Chris, you've been around for a while. In the most positive form, as I mentioned it. Yeah. So how would you see venture capitalism have evolved itself if it would be now 2036? We're sitting here, how,
We would be sitting here.
Well, would it be virtual? I'm not so sure.
This would. So I'm so sorry.
A lot of complexity will have gone. I think it will just be refined. A lot of things which don't need to be there won't be there anymore. I think at the moment VCs find themselves having to do too many things, and the founders of companies also have to do too many things. I've been struck 4 or 5 times today, and the last time we had Catherine on stage in London, that everybody said, well, we spoke to X, and he said, no, not now. But I put in a call to them every 6 months, and I kept it going, and that's a really important thing to do. Now, there are a lot of guys out there who won't remember to do that, or won't have the time and the bandwidth to do that. And those kinds of maintenance things that use up time, but in a way that doesn't seem profitable, but actually pays off in a big way in the long term, those need to be taken out and refined down into easier ways to do things, so that the guys who are dreaming up and implementing and delivering on these plans focus on doing the things that really can. So I suppose, ideally, in 2036, I will still be there watching it, but it will be less, it'll be simpler, and everybody will be much more focused on one or two things.
So streamlined, that's what you're saying.
Yeah. Because I look around, and it is hard work, and it hurts a lot. And that is the way that it needs to be, because you are titanic strugglers against the forces of entropy and inertia. But you can be doing things, and that should become easier, because it should become more agile and more streamlined.
So maybe history can tell us something. So if I didn't live through venture capital in 1996, but people I worked with did live through it then. And let me tell you how things work. So they would go to events where they'd speak on a panel, they'd meet founders, and they would shake hands, they would spend 2-3 minutes chatting, they'd say, we should get together and chat further about this. So that hasn't really changed in 20 years. And it was early, but you receive an email from someone with a PowerPoint attached to that email. It was a PDF PowerPoint. And it was a clickable link that then tracked what you give me your email address and they track you. But basically the same thing. You'd receive an email with a business plan and you would say, looks interesting, I want to meet this man, this woman, whatever it might be. And you'd meet in person. You would then do some diligence and you would get to understand what the business is, and then you make an investment proposal and the lawyers would come in. And so it actually hasn't changed that much. It is definitely faster. The iteration speed has increased tremendously. But the actual process and how it's done, honestly, I mean, it's kind of like those things where you could take someone from 1950, put them in today's world, they would basically be able to get around. Took a venture capitalist or a founder from 1995 and put them down, they'd probably be able to play the game the exact same way. It just moves a little bit quicker. So I think we'll see continued movement along the pace metric.
And I think that one of the other great things I sort of carry on from that is that the thing that I've really enjoyed about coming back from the US and coming back to the UK is that there is capital in the system. There's liquidity, which wasn't there. And when Sean's talking about the only place that you could legitimately raise money in Silicon Valley, that's the thing that's so exciting to me. So many entrepreneurs from different countries, from different cultures, from different places, coming to wherever. It could be here, it could be Berlin, it could be Singapore, wherever, to build their company for a reason. And there's early stage capital for them there. That is just super exciting, because that hasn't been the case until really till 5 years ago.
So the world's biggest music company, Stockholm. The world's biggest games company, Finland, right? I mean, this is, you're right, 20 years ago that didn't happen, and we're going to continue to see that diffusion of ideas across the world.
Right.
Just one observation, when I look at the pitches, don't know all of the nationalities, but it is an extremely international audience.
Yeah. Right.
And I see that only accelerating. And so while we are all worried about borders, ultimately, no, I'm not. Ultimately, the community will be a global community, and I think capital will travel more easily, and I think ideas will travel more easily, and that is just then speed, but also addressable market. So there, where we all envy the U.S. being 340 million likewise consumers, that sort of is going to ultimately be open to anyone.
So continents are going to compete more.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to speak about Brexit. Sorry, earlier this morning we were talking about, are there opportunities in Brexit? Well, there is one big opportunity in Brexit, which is that the Mayor of London this morning was talking about taking over more capital raising and taxing powers in order to allow London not just to remain as a centre of technology innovation, but to get stronger. In other words, that some of the EU regulations make it more difficult for London to be what it is, and that actually this is an opportunity to intensify the internationalisation of what we do. Now, I don't buy that EU regulations get in the way thing. I've never found that they did for me, but if people think they do, and we loosen it up in London, then that can't be a bad thing.
Well, I think that they don't let EIS investors have a pref share, right? Doesn't that come from Europe?
You can. I mean,
Yeah, sure, but they made it hard, right?
The
yeah, the European Investment Bank also funds half the venture capital funds in the UK, right? So there are some other things here.
Details.
My favorite was Cornwall saying, well, they voted to leave right now. It's like, we were told we'd be guaranteed as much money as we get from the EU.
They promised that, yeah. Yeah, they were.
Sorry, you can't stop us talking about Brexit.
No,
It's,
Are you going to get questions from it?
Yes. Can I borrow your mic? So let's do 4 questions. Try to keep it as concise, and please mention your name and your company when you stand up and speak to the rest.
I'm Alberto, my company is Spixit. Quick question for all of you. What is the number one problems that you face when you source deals? What are your biggest challenge?
I think I'll kick it off. It's probably fairly obvious, but it's the point Chris made about noise, and Sean's talking about it. I think it's just time management. It's just monumentally difficult for all of us, and we're in a business, we have to respect that, the position of the capital, but to be absolutely inundated by people who just fundamentally, on the positive side, won't take no for an answer, but fundamentally believe that there's the only business opportunity you're going to invest in, or people who demand your time without giving a reason, like just meet me for coffee, without saying why. Those things, that's just really challenging, because we all want to be polite and respond to absolutely everybody, but that's becoming harder and harder.
For me, the biggest issue is that people don't always think about who owns the data. And a lot of the value in startups is ownership of data. But people don't.
Sorry, Christian, Mike, anything is on? Oh, put it closer.
That works better. Very often people who are involved in startups don't have total control of who owns the data or where it's going. And yet it's the best way to monetize the business, or it can be, or to deliver revenue to the business. And a number of cases where I find they just haven't got on top of that bid is probably 1 in 2 significant number.
Do you have an IP practice that would help with that?
I don't, but I know.
From my side, it's also time and efficiency, but it's sort of an ask, which is shoot for the moon, have extremely ambitious plans, but when you're fundraising, be extremely honest and clear, like, this is where we are, this is where we think we could be, and if all goes right, we could be here. Because if you only present this plan and we have to spend a month figuring out that, well, really it's here, it's just not a pleasant exercise for either party. So transparency in that sense, I think, can only benefit you, particularly if you're talking to an investor who might want to invest in 1 or 2 years from now. The plan you present today will be looked at 1 year or 2 years later. If you outperform that plan, you're very likely going to get money. If you vastly underperform, why would we then believe your next growth phase? So I think it pays off to be transparent.
I mean, where we screw up is we are too slow at iteration speed ourselves, right? We ponder on a business, we think about it, we debate back and forth, and we don't actually trust the gut up front and just go with it very quickly. So that's it. And then the second thing, I can yell quite loudly. The second thing for us, sorry, it's not even, it's a problem for us, but it's a, I hate to give advice, because who am I to give advice, but actually, complete transparency, right? If an investor or potential investor asks for some numbers, don't hide, don't obfuscate, don't change things. I mean, it has to be exactly what it is, because we all know these are early stage companies, and it's about setting that expectation, that trust level early, where both sides are clear about what's going to go back and forth. And the moment you try to hide bad numbers, whatever it might be, it ruins the relationship, and it kills any sort of trust level that we might have.
Okay, so next question. Stand up.
My name is Lena, Adventures company. You did some analysis on how much did it change since 10 years. Can you tell, what about exit? Do you still allow companies to go IPO, or you expect that the company will be sold, or it can be management buyout, or what are your expectations in these terms?
So here's the thing, VCs don't control the exit, right? In the end, we all want companies to exit in some way, shape, or form. Frankly, in today's climate, I don't mean Brexit, I mean broadly the current tech environment, any exit is a good exit. the markets have been closed to technology companies over the last year or so, right? So it's not like it's our choice to not let companies go public. From a VC perspective, an acquisition is a much cleaner proposition because we don't have to sit on shares for 6 months, 12 months, but walk up and then sell them out to the public markets. So acquisitions are cleaner. Traditionally, there's been more value expressed in public market listings, but we'll see what happens in the future.
Yeah, it really depends on your business and on the cycle that you're in. We tend to set a strategy jointly, which includes an exit, because we do have exit rights, and then you have to see where you are in the cycle to choose the right moment. But yeah, our goal is certainly not an IPO. But in some instances, it's a very elegant way out because you create liquidity for maybe different parties that are involved in the company. I personally like it a lot more that from the start, you know, these are the 10 strategics that should be buying your company in 3 years from now.
Yeah, the only point I'd sort of add to that is, you know, what's the logic for the acquisition? Let's just talk about trade sales or strategic buyers. You know, very generally, there are kind of 3 reasons why a big technology company is going to buy a small technology company. They're going to do an acqui-hire, and there's going to be a price per engineer, which varies from subsector to subsector. They're going to buy core technology because that company's built something that they don't have that they need to deliver their product or service to customers. Or it's going to be a strategic exit, like when Facebook realized that, oh shit, we're not the best photo sharing network out there, we better buy Instagram quickly. It doesn't really, the price is kind of what we all dream of. So they're the 3 kind of broad speaking reasons why technology companies will get acquired. I think that you just have to know that the route can change, but have an idea of the destination, a very clear idea of the destination. People who come to the office and we say, why are you doing it? Something to someone coming to Facebook in 3 years' time. It's a kind of lame-ass idea, a reason for building a company. But, you know, so I just think really clearly about what that route could be and why the logic is for buying the company.
One thing we've seen a little bit recently is dual track, where you have an IPO alongside a trade sale. Very often, unfortunately, that's just a stalking horse in the sense that the IPO price is used to market to make sure that the trade sale price is actually a fair reflection to keep some of the investors happy. So beware of those in a sense. You think you're going down an IPO path, but you may just be used to market price.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you.